Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. Two brands up the ante with two new generation half-inch impacts, and it makes for an entertaining yet mind-boggling episode today. And if you're thinking, I mainly like cordless tools, this should be boring, you're in for a wild ride. We are talking T-Rex levels of record-breaking torque, sticker prices that frankly make me want to go back to bed, updates to top tools people have been waiting 10 years for, shockingly confusing performance, and even more mystifying missing parts I could have sworn you needed to have in an impact wrench that required us employing our 10,000 frames per second high-speed camera to answer some make-or-break questions. And let's not play coy, that's going to include this Matco sort of Gen 3 MT3779 REX impact that's flashing numbers like 600 smackaroos, and yes, we've made it there, folks. 1,700 foot-pounds, and this all-new Ingersoll Rand 2236, which is also a Gen 3 and no slouch in the torque ratings, a model we and many folks have been waiting 10 years for. Now we're going to start with this IR and rope in the Matco a bit later in testing because this one is just so damn weird. And one of those reasons is going to be this empty cavity out front of it. Yeah, this is female spline driven, like a wheel hub shrunken down. It comes in the box empty with a half-inch drive anvil just hanging out in there, and you put it in yourself. It's sort of wild. Now this 2236 QTI Max is the next gen version of their 2235 Ti Max that came out a decade ago, which was their Gen 2 of this tool, the 2135, which came out, jumping another 10 years further back from that. So people have been waiting for the new version. That 2235, though, has a mighty reputation for being stout, hard to kill, and powerful. To this day, it does well against many modern impacts, especially if you turn up that air pressure. But this new 2236 is supposed to do you one better, rated at a full 1,500 foot-pounds breakaway torque, a 150 foot-pound increase, and 1,000 foot-pounds max torque. But the price also moving up in the numbers, around $100 more at $370. For that increase, you get quite a few cool changes though. Overall length from 7.6, that actually measured 7.7 for us, down to 7.36 inches now, which is welcome for a modern tool. But that's not all. This swappable anvil is not just for ease of repair, which would be a plus. Impacts are getting monstrous these days and anvils are breaking more than ever. What they're calling DXS system allows you to turn this into a 3/4 inch impact, an extended anvil impact in 1/2 inch or 3/4, which I think is sort of brilliant, and even a 3/8 impact by swapping one of those in, which I think is kind of scary. And not for all that much coin either, 35 to 50 bucks. This 3/4 inch and 6 inch long extended 3/4 cost us 85 bucks, which is a lot cheaper than buying an additional 3/4 inch impact for sure, though not that size of tool, so likely less power too. I guess we'll find out. Not so sure about that 3/8 drive though, be careful with your settings I guess, that seems not too long for this world. And speaking of the world, we did notice one last thing here, and that's despite saying assembled in the US on the packaging, it's very much a worldwide tool, or at least primarily China. The box for the tool says USA, but when you order the anvils, one of the most crucial and hard to make well parts of an impact, especially in their never before seen spline form, those are made in China, just like if you order parts like rotor vanes, cylinder, hammer. Those replacements come in bags marked China as well. It's been going on since the 90s. Everyone knows IR has a factory in China. They make good stuff, let's face it, but they could probably just pull the mask off at this point. Onto the dyno though, we're going to include the famously good IR 2235 Ti Max, as well as the current top scoring air gun, the Thor Gen 2, and why not a highly ranked cordless high torque as well, the DCF 900, for reference. $469 foot-pounds, and looking very familiar there. Air impacts, IR and snap-on in particular though, not tuned for forward in this working torque test. If you want to see some real difference on the curve between Gen 2 and Gen 3, let me introduce you to reverse max torque, and not the kind of difference you'd like to see on this tool either. Yeah, it's making less here, quite a bit less, and this was a median test. We ran it 5 times with pneumatic oil used per usual and everything, which got me a bit curious, enough to start to measure RPM on this 8500 Ripplums tool, which we're only seeing 6600 or 6300 in forward, and this is discovering the reason for that in real time.
The RPM? Yeah, I got it right here. Way. They did it again.
That's right, it's 1000 RPM higher in low. Not quite 8500, but that's not totally unusual. We get like 9000 RPM from their 10,000 RPM street legal Thunder Gun. So this small dot is high, the large dot is low. Totally makes sense now, right? Well, it depends actually. In forward, the large dot is high now and the small dot is low. It drops all the way from 63 to 4600 when you turn it down to the small dot. What makes this doubly crazy is we ran into this same issue on their latest compact air impact, the 36Q Max. They've had years to fix this and instead implemented it on their new flagship impact. It boggles the mind. And there's no way to know this without a Skidmore or dyno like ours, or at least a cheap RPM gauge. So yeah, if you own this tool, when it's in reverse, set it to low, which is this. This is its real max torque run after figuring that out. 519 from its last run to beat. $619 foot-pounds and looking mighty familiar once again, once we turn the dial correctly or incorrectly, depending how you want to think about it. It's worth mentioning we go into testing a tool like this with no memory or notes of what the last one did. We just calibrate the dyno and test it. And yet looking a lot like the 2235 here, but with a swappable anvil, which hey, it's not the worst thing. Last test in 1/2 inch before we try 3/4 inch attachments and bring a 1700 foot-pound Matco to the party. Best case scenario, an increase to 150 PSI static line pressure. Its best run, here it is. $733. Don't get me wrong, the 2235 famously likes more and more pressure. You can rival this DeWalt in Thor with enough of that line pressure, so it's a hard act to follow. The Gen 3 2236 just doesn't seem to get all that juiced up from extra pressure though. And we tested the hell out of this tool because really IR is usually just good stuff and we wanted to be sure, and we are. This 2236 we bought makes this amount of power. In person it feels that way too. Sure, it could be just outright defective, but that's not necessarily a better thing from our perspective. But we do think something else is instead going on. Let's take a look at 3/4 inch. Swapping over to a 3/4 inch anvil on this tool, this easy, you do get the hang of it the more you do it. For this price on something this complicated to machine is pretty awesome. Of course, if it's not making more power than their last 1/2 inch impact, like we're still seeing here, the usefulness of that is really sort of hampered. All in all, it is a gain, a little less than normal from an anvil swap, but nothing too far off, 745 foot-pounds. And this is where things start to get even more weird. The extended length 3/4 inch anvil swapped into this tool. Now there was some disagreement here, we were split. I said it should make the same power, but it was also argued that the new anvil should make more power. But that doesn't make any sense to me. We've tested extended anvils before and they've all made the same power as standard anvils. And yet that's what it's doing here, making more power. 3 tests, same results, a noticeable amount too, up to 776. As cool as that is, and it is a good sign, we're going to break out our 10,000 frames per second high-speed camera to take a closer gander at it. While this extension is chunky, sure, that does help. Normally we get more torque delivery on larger diameter extensions, like 1/2 inch drive extensions, which means the anvil here, usually an integral part of the tool, to our experience, might be behaving more like an attachment to an impact wrench than a part of the impact wrench. Something the decently snug fitting spline design is likely trying to eliminate. But the short anvil here is the smoking gun in a way. Notice with each hit how not just the socket, but the anvil attached recoils and rocks around a bit. Just looking at this footage, it appears more locked in or clocked in time with the socket than as part of the gun. That usually spells wasted kinetic energy transmission on things we measure around here. And this was a surprise to also pick up. Check this out. You see this puff? Even at 5,000 frames per second, it's gone in a flash. That's because the anvil appears to be flash igniting some grease from inside this female spline drive. A literal smoking gun, as it were. There's enough movement between the two bodies that a gap is created, then slapped together, creating a small concentration of heat enough to ignite the petroleum-based grease. Now that's not all that strange. Lots of slapping going on in a greasy twin hammer mechanism like this one. It's part of how they work. But it is an additional energy losing location or joint that we assume is at least partially to blame for the power we've measured. As the hammer assembly itself, being 1 pound 3.4 ounces, is definitely above average, so it's not lacking there. Okay, so that was a lot of geeky stuff and loosely based assumptions based on our mere observations. Let's get back to the beans, the 1,700 foot-pound rated Matco MT3779 that they've coined the REX, that a kind viewer by the name of Isaac wanted to know how it would do, so lent us this rather good looking purple one. Can't say I own any purple tools myself, but this looks strangely cool. Despite looking a lot like the Ingersoll Rand, similar lengths, similar weights, overall shape, it's more borrowing a lot of what's liked about those designs than not the same as. Since Ingersoll Rand hasn't made Matco impacts in close to a decade now, this one being made by PTP for Matco only. And also like that IR, it's a continuation of an already popular tool, in this case the MT2779. A tool that made waves in our world many years ago by rating this tool 1,600 foot-pounds, which was a high water mark in the world at the time, and this one takes the crown again. The highest rated half-inch impact on the planet is this, the 1,700 foot-pound bolt breakaway MT3779. Specs like this make us wonder how brands expect a half-inch drive to even withstand 1,700 foot-pounds. I know the mechanics of hammer blows are different than linear applications of radial torque, but still, and Matco agrees. Along with other bits to increase torque, I'm sure, one change they made to this tool was a new heavier duty anvil to withstand the abuse. They coated it black to highlight that change in alloy or processing. The forward reverse buttons on this tool are super nice, the dial as well, 4 power mode positions, and each with a crisp detent. This dial, despite being backwards sometimes, doesn't stop on the modes, or at least it's mushy, and the reverse button stops before seating, like you have to remember to push it that last bit. This caused us in testing more than once, for instance, to make a mere 482 foot-pounds because we didn't notice the button wasn't pushed and clicked all the way down. And these are types of things that IR usually aces too. But let's see if the Matco can ace things in torque. We're going to hop into all of its testing now. Here's the Matco's 5-second working torque test versus today's competition. "543 foot-pounds, quite a bit up on the new IR, but not quite at the level of the Thor, at least in forward. And that DeWalt, yeah, cordless tools tend to love forward torque. On to reverse, 10 seconds of max torque, median result on screen as usual. Here's the Matco again. "820 foot-pounds. Geez, talk about burying the lead, leaving this thing to last. That's simply the order we ourselves tested and uncovered things today, but that's a new air impact record, the first to break into the 800s in fact, and damn near an overall record. Taking a bit longer than the Thor to get up there, but that curve, it looks like it's not done, and I'm not about to stand in its way either. Let's see what she can do with static pressure now turned up to 150 psi instead of the manufacturer's recommended running pressure. "898 foot-pounds, another record. Given the size, weight, smoothness, it's not very dramatic to hold on to when it's tackling the most it can do. I'm not sure how they pulled this one off. It's pricey, but it's punchy. Personally, I felt the non-existent outside appearance changes, maybe an anvil color, we wouldn't see much change between these two tools, but it's more of a bump than even they advertised by their numbers. And in case you feel a little bit ripped off that this thing got so close to 900 but didn't crest it, at 160 psi static pressure instead of 150, static being the gun causes that pressure to drop to whatever it does, this thing piles on even more torque, like not every impact will happily do, up to the tune of 920 foot-pounds now. Like slapping an M18 Forge onto a Milwaukee, but free. Well, maybe at the eventual cost of using that warranty, but hey, that's why you're buying off of a tool truck, right? Not your problem. On to the rankings. Starting below the previous IR, the new IR's runs look mighty familiar until we get to higher pressure and the highest torque levels, and there you see that change appear and not the one we were expecting. In the Matco gun, yeah, it brought it today. 90 points here is a lot. As a function of their length and the most torque we got out of them today, how much potential per inch you get out of each of these tools, similar lengths, but 99.6 and 124.3, 120 to 130s we generally feel is like industry leading tech these days. Sure, their bolt breakaway numbers are sky high, but in measurable, calibratable old school testing practices, their advertised max torque only increased 50 on the Matco gun and 70 on the IR. The Purple Princess over here getting the crown, bumping things up more than advertised, making for 73% and 100% of advertised max torque figures. Nice. This is where things are gonna hurt though for both tools. Neither are cheap, and doubly so for the Matco, 29.7 and 22.5 points, not a lot. But that totals 384.3 and 472.8, placing the new IR above their street legal old school Thunder gun the way we see it, and the Matco damn near right at the top above the DCF 900 DeWalt. That's good stuff. If this had cost the same as some of these tools, it would be near or at the top. But yeah, as it is, you can buy a handful of these for one of these. But if you'd like to ignore pricing altogether, just score these tools on merit, we can head over to average power. Torque averaged across a run per second, purely ranked on that. We see a cool 700 here, which is even better than it might appear. This figure here, unlike the last page, was done with a 1/2-inch hose since the tool comes with a 3/8 NPT inlet. The Matco has a standard 1/4-inch MPT and recommends a 3/8 hose, which is what we used. And these all needed some serious batteries to place up here, a 15 amp hour and only in the forward direction in this one's case. The MT3779 is simple. We don't see any cheat codes inside. A 1-pound hammer assembly is even lighter than the new Ingersoll Rand. Its new motor just must really know how to spin it. The Ingersoll Rand is a design the Matco clearly borrowed a lot of inspiration from, and somehow we feel improved upon it in every way. This interchangeable spline design in many ways I feel is fresh, innovative, and provides a lot of value in one gun. But on the one we bought, it's just not there yet in torque and wasted impact energy from what we can tell. Maybe they can perfect it. Until then, more options than ever to UGA all your Duggas. We make episodes every Friday. Click subscribe to join us for those, and thanks for watching.